Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. It's delightful to see you all here. I'm Hari-kirtana, and as always, it is a great pleasure for me to be here with you, an honor to have you here with me. And as usual, I will ask you to let me know that you can hear the words coming out of my mouth by clicking on the raise hand button over. Very good. Thank you very much for all raising your hands. And I will take that to mean that you can all hear me. Okay, Jess, no worries. I hope your new year is off to a great start. So far, so good here. No justifiable complaints, just the usual unjustifiable ones. And let's take a quick run through our usual housekeeping routine. For all of you who are new to the satsang, you can adjust your audio settings and your viewing options up in the upper right-hand corner. No need to worry about your mic or video camera because you can hear and presumably see me as well. I cannot see or hear you, but I know you're there. And if you have anything you would like to share with us, any questions or comments, please type them into the chat window. I also have the Q&A box open just in case you would rather be there for that purpose. And that takes care of our housekeeping. Our last class, last week, we began chapter 17, the yoga of threefold divisions of faith. And we spoke about comparing deference to scripture, to personal truth, and faith in the three qualities of material nature. We covered the first 3 verses. So here in this chapter, Krishna is responding to a question from Arjuna that he is following up with from the previous chapter. And we're looking pretty closely now at the gunas, the 3 qualities of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, as they are expressed by people in various ways. So tonight's class, we'll cover verses 4 through 10. We'll look at offerings in the different qualities of nature. We will talk quite a bit about what we eat and how we are what we eat, or how, or what we eat says about us. So this also can be an exercise in svadhyaya, or self-study, trying to understand ourselves by looking at what we do. And one of the things we do is eat. So looking at what we eat, how we eat, when we eat, et cetera, that can tell us something about how we're affected by the 3 qualities of material nature and how others are as well. We'll also look at offerings beyond the qualities of material nature as we cover these 4 verses. We will begin, as always, with our invocation mantra. So for those of you who are new to transliterated Sanskrit, Sanskrit written in the Roman alphabet, the dot over an M indicates that we close our lips and close the back of our tongue to the back of the roof of our mouths at the same time, creating a round shape with our mouth. And a bar over a vowel indicates an elongated, open version of that vowel, as opposed to without a bar, in which case it's a short and more contained version of that vowel. And with that, I will chant this invocation mantra, and if you like, you can chant back. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Translation: I offer my respects to the Supreme Person, the son of Vasudeva, who is the all-pervading transcendence and who is the speaker of the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. Hence the appropriateness of our invocation mantra. Last week, we did not do verse 1624. This is actually, I'm going to fix that right now. 17:1. Arjuna asked Krishna a question as a follow-up to the previous, from the previous chapter. O Krishna, what is the position of those whose worship is endowed with faith, but who do not follow the authoritative principles of Scripture? Are they in goodness, in passion, or in ignorance? So we spoke about how it's interesting that Arjuna asks his question specifically within the context of the three gunas, the three qualities of material nature, also can be translated as strands, ropes, modes of being. The three constituent parts of material nature, consisting of goodness, which is characterized by knowledge, clarity of thought, compassionate detachment, and results in the elevation of consciousness. The mode of passion, which is characterized by intense endeavor and attachment to the results, selfish desire, and the pursuit of that desire in a very intense way. And then the mode of ignorance, which is characterized by apathy, sleep, results in foolishness, violence towards others, etc. So in Sanskrit, these three are known as sattva, rajas, and tamas. And we focused on shastra vidhim, is the phrase in this particular verse in Sanskrit, meaning the regulations of Scripture, or the injunctions of Scripture. And when we think about this, most of us are just not all that familiar with yoga wisdom texts. That's why we're studying Bhagavad-gita. I actually decided to do this project of teaching Bhagavad-gita online as much for myself, to give myself an excuse, basically, to really dive deep into the Bhagavad-gita and to increase my own knowledge of this kind of exemplary, essential yoga wisdom text, as for any other reason. Most of us are simply not familiar with these texts. So this is a really relevant question. The objective of yoga is to elevate consciousness, meaning to move consciousness from the influence of the modes of passion and ignorance up into goodness, and goodness acts as kind of a platform, a launch pad for transcendental goodness, known as shuddha sattva. So this is a really relevant question. We also asked another question. Is it logical to accept Scripture as the first kind of authority on what is true, what we should accept, what we should believe? We have a resistance to this idea, and a reasonable resistance to anything that looks like blind faith, or maybe the Scripture that we grew up with didn't really resonate for us, or didn't have everything that we needed, or we couldn't find what we needed in it. It might have been there, but maybe it was obscured somehow or other. So the three evidences, called pramana in Sanskrit, the three ways we can know that something is true according to yoga are direct perception, logic, and verbal testimony, which is Scripture, and the teachings of those who are fluent and familiar with that Scripture. So I use this quote, "What the mind cannot believe, the heart cannot finally adore," by Bishop John Shelby Spong, retired Episcopal bishop, to help us to focus on why it's important to see a good reason to have faith in Scripture. That is to say, as we have spoken of fairly consistently in these classes, faith must be reasonable. Faith is the mandatory prerequisite to knowledge, but that faith must be reasonable. Which brings us to our verses for this week. So I will read through the translation of each of the verses, then we'll go back individually and look at each one. So here we go. We begin with, okay, hold on a second. Carla, that's such a good comment. So maybe the spiritual texts were never meant to be translated literally. So this is also something worthy of consideration. How should one understand such texts? In previous classes, some of you who've been along for the ride for a while have heard me speak about the value of both literal and metaphorical understandings. That is to say, there are places where, at least with the Bhagavad-gita, the meaning is self-evident. You don't have to read anything into it. You don't have to interpret it in any way. There are other places where it's very clearly an allegory. There's a metaphor being used that is meant to help us go deeper into an understanding of what's being spoken about. And then there are places where both are applicable. That is to say, you can accept the self-evident meaning of the text, and there's also a metaphorical meaning as well. And they don't conflict with each other. If you can read a text and make sense of it in both a literal and a figurative way, then you've got something that is really solid. If, however, we dismiss the literal altogether and only look for the metaphorical, we run the risk of missing a self-evident truth that is being presented in the text. So not every verse in the Bhagavad-gita, in my opinion, and in the opinion of my teachers, should be interpreted in such a way as to lose the self-evident meaning of the text. So as we read Bhagavad-gita, what I'd like to encourage everyone to do is look for both. Ask yourself, if I just take this literally, does it make sense? Is it logical? Does it conform to my experience? If I act on the basis of the literal meaning of this, what happens? What does it show me? Then ask yourself, what is the metaphorical meaning here? What's the symbolic meaning here? If I can see an allegorical meaning or a symbolic application of this verse, does that make sense? Is it logical? How can I apply it in my life? And what realization do I get? What insight do I get from the practical application of this metaphorical or symbolic understanding? And I think that our experience of Scripture is much deeper and more complete when we go about it that way. And then you can use this way of reading Scripture to evaluate the Scripture itself. There is or there can be quite a difference between what we read insofar as direct teachings of some scriptures and the commentarial tradition that develops around a teaching. And sometimes as different faith forms evolve, we may find they evolve on the basis of a particular interpretation or commentary, as opposed to a direct reading of the teaching itself. And in this way, you get so many different varieties of religion, which we translate in Bhagavad-gita as meaning again, ligio, to connect, to bind back. So here in the Gita, we're looking for universal principles of religion that provide the basis for religious experience, as opposed to following a particular religion. And these universal principles should be universally applicable. And you can take those universal principles and then go back and look at any sacred literature and then find them. Anyway, I hope that is a nice reply or a satisfactory reply to your comment, which I really appreciate. So thank you very much for bringing that up, because that's really very relevant to this section of the Gita, where Krishna is actually spending a lot of time talking about the significance of scripture. And as we get into these verses, I think what you'll see is that we may have to rephrase the question. We're asking, is it logical to defer to scripture? And, Arjuna asks questions, and sometimes Krishna is kind of reframing the question, like he didn't really ask the right question. So now we're going to ask ourselves, did we ask the right question when we considered this question of, is it logical to defer to scripture? So I'll go through the verses, then we will see about this possible reframing of the question as we go. And good, you're very welcome. So we begin with verse number 4 of chapter 17, translation. Those who are influenced by the mode of goodness offer their worship to the gods. Those in the mode of passion make offerings to the demons. Those in the mode of ignorance make offerings to nature's spirits and hordes of ghosts. Dum, dum, dum. Verse 5. Those who perform horrible austerities, not prescribed in the scriptures, who are fully invested in hypocrisy and egoism, and are forcefully driven by desire and attachment. This line of thinking continues into verse 6. Who are mindless tormentors of the totality of material elements that constitute the body, and thus of me, who dwells within the body. Know them to be of an ungodly disposition. Verse 7. Even culinary tastes differ among people in this threefold fashion, as do offerings, austerities, and charity. Now hear of these distinctions. Verse 8. Foods that expand the duration of one's life, purify one's existence, and give strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction, that are succulent, flavorful, wholesome, and pleasing, are dear to those who are influenced by the quality of goodness. Text 9. Foods that are excessively bitter, sour, salty, hot, pungent, dry, and burning are dear to those who are influenced by the mode of passion. Such foods give rise to distress, misery, and disease. Verse 10. Foods that are spoiled, tasteless, rancid, and stale, consisting of rejected remnants, and that which is impure, are dear to those who are influenced by the mode of darkness. also known as the mode of ignorance. All right, so now let's go back to verse 4, which was, those who are influenced by the mode of goodness offer their worship to the gods. So gods translates the word deva, indicating a demigod. So not the one God with a capital G, but the personalities who are empowered to run the affairs of the universe, to make sure that the sun comes up where it's supposed to and sets where it's supposed to. The cosmos works according to its design, basically. Those in the mode of passion make offerings to the demons. So in the previous chapter, Krishna went into considerable detail, contrasting godly and ungodly, or divine and demonic dispositions, natures. And if you missed that, go back and check it out, because it provides the context for what's being spoken about here and can be surprising. We spoke in that chapter about how a lot of what we consider normal, Krishna seems to think is demonic. And those in the mode of ignorance make offerings to nature spirits and hordes of ghosts. So there are lots of different ways to speak about these qualities or modes of nature. So you could say this in different ways. Someone who is in the mode of goodness, someone whose nature is predominated by goodness, someone who partakes of the nature of goodness, someone who is influenced by the mode of goodness or is operating in the mode of goodness. It describes a state of being as well as a constituent part of material nature that acts on us when we speak about these three qualities of goodness, passion, and ignorance. When Krishna speaks of the nature spirits and hordes of ghosts, he's actually speaking about something kind of specific here. There are specific groups of ethereal and sometimes dangerous beings. If you've ever done ayahuasca, you may have met some of them. In Sanskrit, yakshas and rakshas are the words used to describe these kinds of beings. It's also a word that describes beings or living entities whose edibles consist of meat, that is to say, the flesh of dead animals. Now, this foreshadows a little bit of what's to come when we start talking about food. Rakshasas, yakshas, ghosts, hobgoblins, these kinds of beings are, the patron saint of such beings is Lord Shiva. Shiva is a member of a triad consisting of himself, Brahma, the first created being of the universe, if we are to take other yoga wisdom texts literally, and Vishnu, who is an expansion of Krishna, according to Krishna's version of how divinity rolls out into the material cosmic manifestation. So Shiva is in charge of the quality of ignorance. Hence, those beings who are influenced by or whose nature or state of being is in the mode of ignorance, they come under his protection and direction. A name for Shiva is Bhutanath. So Bhuta means ghosts, Natha means master or lord. So Bhutanath means the master of the ghosts. If you're having trouble with ghosts, you may want to appeal to Lord Shiva to pacify them. Brahma is in the mode of passion, which stands to reason because he is the person to whom the manufacturing of the universe is delegated. Vishnu, the maintainer, the preserver, is in charge of the mode of goodness. And if you have any questions about what I've covered so far, please go ahead, pop them in the chat, and I will keep an eye over there so that I will be ready to answer your questions. Meanwhile, back on the screen, the next verse and the verse that follows, we're going to chant. So this is verse number 5, and I'll explain a little bit more about the diacritical marks. These are the marks that give you the pronunciation cues for transliterated Sanskrit. An accent mark over an S indicates an SH sound that you sound way back at the base of your jaw. So you're going to curl your tongue back and make the sound come out of the base of your jaw, as opposed to a regular SH sound from right behind your teeth, a little higher sound. And if you see an S with a dot under it, that's going to be a regular SH sound as we would sound it in American English. I've already explained the bar across a vowel, dot over an M. A dot under an H at the end of a word, at the end of a line, means that the vowel that preceded the H will be echoed back. That is to say, a short version of that vowel. So even if the vowel before the H is a long vowel, a short version of that vowel is what's going to bounce back. We pronounce each letter that we see. So an H after a consonant means we're just going to put some air after that consonant. And I think that covers it for this verse. So I'll chant this one line at a time. And if you like, you can chant it back. Ashastra vehitam ghoram tapyante ye tapo janaha dhambha hankara samyuktaha kamaraga balanvitaha Translation once again. Those who perform horrible austerities not prescribed in the scriptures, who are fully invested in hypocrisy and egoism and are forcefully driven by desire and attachment. So we leave off here, but this thought, these two verses 5 and 6 are often translated together. So in your edition of the Bhagavad-gita, you may see that these are translated together. Before I continue, let's take a question. Why does passion have such a negative connotation? In Western traditions, passion does not seem to have such a negative connotation. Carla, good question. Not foolish at all. So let's hang here for a second with that. I remember I worked for a company based in France, which was nice for me because that's the only way I got to see Paris. And the office, the other office, the manufacturing office for this company was down in Grenoble. So that's all the way down on the south. We had a train ride and I got to speak. It was a relatively small company, so I had access to the top executives for the job that I was doing. And we got into a discussion about this very thing. I spoke about how in yoga philosophy, there are these three qualities, and the mode of passion is something to be transcended rather than cultivated. And, you know, these were guys who were building a company. They wanted to build it up to a public offering or to sell the company. They're looking to make some money here. And they're like, how can you, you know, really be into something and pursue it vigorously and with enthusiasm if you're not passionate about it? And, you know, okay, point taken. Now we have to understand what we mean by passion. and how you can take whatever nature you have and leverage it into a higher nature. So Sanskrit is not always an easy language to translate. Almost anything is going to be lost a little bit in translation. Reading The Master and Margarita in the original Russian is certainly a very different experience than reading any translation, no matter how good it may be. So similarly, there's a lot of words in Sanskrit that what they mean in English, when we translate them, is not always a one-to-one thing. So the quality of passion, when we speak about it in the terms of yoga, is an indication of hankering. At least it comes from a sense of hankering, of intense desire, and then an intense endeavor that's associated with the pursuit of fulfilling that desire, which is a material desire. That is to say, something that you want because it will make your senses happy, because it will make some sense of your identity, your embodied identity, happy. In other words, we have an embodied identity that consists of these three qualities of material nature, some combination. These three qualities of material nature are like primary colors that combine together to make every hue, tint, and shade of every person, place, and thing in the material world, according to yoga philosophy. So our own personalities, the way we identify as, I am this kind of person, I am that kind of person, I like this, I don't like that, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm black, I am white, I'm American, I'm French. These are all, as far as yoga philosophy is concerned, temporary material designations that do not necessarily have anything to do with our eternal spiritual identity. And the mode of passion is one that intensifies this sense of identity and can distort our spiritual intelligence as we get wrapped up with the intense desire to acquire this thing that we want, that we're attached to, and get wrapped up in the intense endeavor of trying to get it. And then once we get it, if we get it, we have to work to keep it, which produces anxiety because we know actually we never get to keep it. You can't take it with you. There's always this race against time to get this thing that I want. And then this fight with time to make sure time never takes it away once we have it. So we're either in a state of anxiety because we don't have the thing that we want. And then we're in a state of anxiety because we have the thing that we want to keep it. So yeah, Annie, thank you for dropping that in. So ego, we're going to get to ego in just a minute. It's a sense of identity. And when that sense of identity is wrapped up in the mode of passion, our focus is on the acquisition of things that we think will make us happy in our material life, as if our material life itself was ever going to be a source of sustainable happiness. So remember, we're operating on the baseline proposition that we are eternal spiritual beings having temporary material experiences. So in that context, the mode of passion has a negative connotation on account of it focuses our attention away from the pursuit of our knowledge of our eternal spiritual identity and the practices that awaken that knowledge in favor of the pursuit of temporary material things that, however desirable they may seem, end up being sources of anxiety and misery and therefore and stalled spiritual progress. So it's not the same thing as enthusiastic, because you can be really, really enthusiastic in your spiritual life. And that's a way of kind of dovetailing the mode of passion up into the mode of goodness, because all of these different gunas can be nested within one another. So you can engage in the mode of passion within the context of the mode of goodness. So this is one way you can think of the relationship of these different gunas. Okay, sounds like passion is similar in Western and Eastern traditions, but most properly given the true negative connotation in the East. Yes, because in the West, the business of America is business, and you know, we invented capitalism, and you know, the Western enterprise, from colonialism to the present day, is all predicated on the predominance of this mode of passion. And therefore Western values seem to think, well, this is good, this is a good thing. And that is why in chapter 16, when you look at all the characteristics that Krishna describes as demonic, we look at that and say, wait a minute, that's just normal. And it can be a little disconcerting if that's what we think is normal. And it holds a mirror up to us both individually and as a society, giving us something to think about. All right, thank you very much. Let's move on to a little more detail about this, this verse. So, where were we? We were actually up to the next verse, where we're going to get into the issue of ego. Let's take actually a closer look at some of the details of this verse as we transition to the next verse. So, a shastra is the first word, and is a negating prefix. Shastra meaning scripture. So a shastra means unscripture, not scripture, or not in the scriptures. So here we see once again that Krishna is emphasizing that the either willful ignorance or the circumstantial ignorance of Shastra is not in the mode of goodness, but rather is going to be in these lower modes of passion and ignorance. And this is where we get the start of the recontextualization of our question. More with that in just a moment. Ego-driven, ahankara. So the word dambha hankara is actually a compound word, two words put together. Dambha, meaning with pride, or hypocrisy, another way of understanding that. And then ahankara specifically means egoism. And ahankara is a Sanskrit word that is, in and of itself, a compound word combined of two words, aham, I, kara, doer. I, the doer. So this base level of egoism is described as the sense that I'm the one who's making things happen. I'm the one who's moving the universe into alignment with my desires. Very much the mode of passion. So this sense of I amness manifests in the mode of passion, not just as I am, but that I am the doer. And earlier, all the way back in the 3rd chapter, we heard Krishna talk about how this is an illusion. Those who were bewildered by the influence of their false ego That is to say, ahankara is understood to be false ego as opposed to our true spiritual identity. Under the influence of this false ego, one thinks, I am the doer of activities. But in actuality, all these activities are being carried out by the three qualities of material nature. So in the interest of time, I am going to pop something into the chat. And for those of you who are listening after the fact, you can also just find this on my website. This is a blog entry that I just put up for the new year called I'm Not Doing Anything. And you can find that on my website in the blog post area. And those of you who are here now can see it in the chat window. All right. So let's continue this line of thought with the next verse. We will also chant this verse, since the two verses really are grouped together. The dot under the S, regular SH sound, as I indicated before. A C is always a CH sound, like cha. So from the center of your roof of your mouth, we'll see a couple of those in this verse. The two Ds are also sounded, just like two M's or two T's. And I think that covers us for this verse. So here we go. I chant each line. If you like, you can chant each line back. Karshayanta sharirastham bhuta gramam achetasaha vam chaivanta sharirastham tan vidyasura nischayan Translation once again, continuing from the previous verse, who are mindless tormentors of the totality of material elements that constitute the body, and thus of me, who dwells within the body, know them to be of an ungodly disposition. So this is a pretty interesting proposition that we've got going on here. So taking a close look at the words in this verse, achetasa. So remember, a negating prefix, chetasa, like chitta, the mind. So achitta or achetasa means one who has lost their mind, or someone who no longer has the power of discrimination or discernment. But the easy way is mindless. That is to say, someone who's lost their mind. Therefore, mindless tormentors of their material body. In other words, people who engage in voluntarily undertaken, goal-oriented hardships that actually do damage to the physical body, that are actually injurious rather than beneficial. And the additional interesting thing here is this line, mam chaivanta sharira stam. So the word sharira, or the phrase sharira stam, appears twice. Sharira means the body. So sharira stam means situated within the body. Notice, by the way, in the Sanskrit, there's no TH sound that, like the, combined together. It's still just an air after a consonant. So sharirastham, situated within the body, is mam, me. Krishna speaking about himself in his role as the Lord of the heart, that is to say, the all-pervading Vasudev, like the mantra that we chanted at the very beginning of our class, the one who is all-pervading, that is to say, situated in the heart of each living being. So this line also certainly situated in the body, me. In other words, when we do things that we know are injurious to ourselves, regardless of the reason, it is also upsetting to the Supreme Person who is residing within our hearts. Now, obviously, this person is invincible, but he's a person. We've spoken earlier about how the complete absolute truth must have the attribute of being a person in order to be complete. And people have feelings. Where do we get our feelings from? Where do we get our personness from? We are all infinitesimal parts of an infinite reality, and that infinite reality has the attribute of being a fully conscious person, both universally and locally. And locally within our hearts, when we do things that are injurious to ourselves, physically, mentally, spiritually, then in a sense, what Krishna is saying is, it is also injurious to the person within our heart. By contrast, when we think of our body as a temple, a spiritual place, a spiritual space within which the Supreme Person resides, well, then we're going to want to take care of it, and we wouldn't think to do harm to it for some selfish reason because, we're not the only ones here. There's somebody else that we have to take into consideration. And, this is true in our regular lives. If we're responsible for someone else, like children perhaps, then, we might not do something we would otherwise do because we're responsible for someone else. This is actually one of the ways that you can have a relationship with the Supreme Person. By thinking, I have to take care of this person. Now, this person is sustaining the whole universe. The whole universe emanates from this person. They're all powerful and all knowing. But at the same time, I can have this sense of a relationship with this Supreme Person who's like riding around inside me, and therefore I have to take care of them. And that's service. That's devotional service, a spiritual activity, to think that I can take care of the Supreme Person. If you have any questions about that wild proposition, then go ahead and let me know. Just pop something in the chat. All right, now let's see how far we get with this. We only have 10 minutes left, and we have these verses that are pretty deep and a little bit heavy as well. This subject comes up a lot in yoga teacher trainings, having to do with food and drink and such like that. And people can be a little sensitive about this sort of thing. And now it becomes a question of, well, how much attention do we really want to pay to what yoga wisdom texts actually say? Annie, I see your question. I'm going to get to it in a second. I'll circle back. So here in this next verse, Krishna says, even culinary tastes differ among people in this threefold fashion. In other words, according to these three qualities of material nature, as do offerings, austerities, and charity. Now hear of these distinctions. So in this next cluster of verses, Krishna is going to look at these four things: food, offerings, austerities, and charity, and talk about them according to each of these three qualities. In other words, what kind of food is attractive to someone in this mode, that mode, or the other mode? What kind of offerings do people in this, that, or the other mode make, etc.? So that's what we're going into in these upcoming verses. The first of which is Foods that expand the duration of one's life, purify one's existence, and give strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction, that are succulent, flavorful, wholesome, and pleasing, are dear to those who are influenced by the quality of goodness. So Annie, the answer to your question is yes. The idea of taking care of the person residing in your heart can be expanded further into the idea that because God is unlimited, the Supreme Being can be in whatever form he likes and has unlimited forms because there's no limit to the Supreme Person, then the Supreme Person can appear as a baby. In the Vedic tradition, Bala Krishna, little baby Krishna, and he's got a mom and family, and they all think, oh, we have to take care of little Krishna. He's totally dependent on us. And he allows himself to be dependent and taken care of and even disciplined by people who have developed somehow or other the inclination to express their love in paternal or maternal affection, familial affection. So yeah, that's where that shows up in the Krishna Bhakti yoga tradition. So back to food. Food that expand the duration of one's life. So Ayurveda, the sister science of yoga, is the science of extending the lifespan of the material body. Veda means knowledge, Ayur, of life extension. So knowledge of extending one's life. And therefore, Ayurvedic diet, you will find, has these different, in addition to lining up with your particular bodily constitution and the time of year. In addition, the reason you coordinate the time of year, the kind of body you have with the kind of food you eat is precisely so that you will eat things that keep your body clean, keep your mind sharp, keep your intelligence snappy, give your body strength and health. And when our bodies are healthy, we tend to be happier. When our bodies are nourished, we experience satisfaction. And those foods tend to be juicy, succulent, flavorful, wholesome, and pleasing. The word here actually is connected to one's heart. So sometimes it's translated as hearty, but what it really means is pleasing to one's heart. So foods in this category would be milk products. Now, in ancient yoga wisdom texts, we find that milk is extolled as extremely virtuous, like a miracle food, that you can do so much with milk, and that milk is good for you in so many ways. Now, there's an assumption here. The first assumption is that the cows who provide the milk are loved and cared for their entire natural lives, as opposed to the modern dairy industry that we have, where the whole thing is just a horror show. The argument for being a vegan from the standpoint of traditional yoga is based on not wanting to perpetuate an industry that is based on cruelty and abuse and exploitation, which is totally valid from the standpoint of yogic values. The argument that a cow's milk is only meant for her calf is not actually accepted in Vedic yoga philosophy. The cow is actually seen, and the bull as well, they are seen as naturally occurring domestic animals. That is to say, there's a natural designed relationship between humans and cows and bulls that's meant to be mutually beneficial. The bull is understood to be the symbol of Dharma, the symbol of yogic values, and honored as one would honor one's father. And similarly, the cow, the symbol of the earth, the source of our being in the material world, is to be honored just like our mother. So milk products are always first on the list of things that are good for you in a Vedic conception of a diet in the mode of goodness. Other things, sugar, not as much sugar as I eat, but sugar, rice, wheat, fruits, and vegetables. These are foods that are very dear, that is to say, that warm the heart of a person who's influenced by the mode of goodness. It's understood that protein will come to us by means of split peas, dal, whole wheat, vegetable protein, and that this is what we will provide us with all the nutrition that we need, and then at the same time keep us in this mode of goodness that acts as as I said earlier, a launching pad to jump to the even higher level of pure goodness. I'm going to quickly go to our shared screen once again, just to bring up something that I believe those of you who've been in these classes for a while have seen before. This is a very integrated chart that shows the different layers of the body in relationship to the chakras, in relationship to the three qualities of material nature. So the Annamaya Kosha, the food body, is the body made of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And naturally, there's a connection to the mental body or the astral senses through the pranic body, the energy body. But we're primarily speaking now of the physical body, which is called the food body. And being the most tactile thing, the most physical thing, as opposed to a metaphysical thing, and the thing that we have a very strong sense of identity with, keeping this body healthy and sound and pure is an important part of our yogic practice. So we're running out of time for this evening. I'm going to come back to this chart and explain a little bit more about it and show you some more of the details when we get together next time. And I will also continue from this verse. We're going to pick it up right where we left off. So we almost talked about we are what we eat this evening. But we did talk about offerings and different qualities of nature, and we've gotten into where Krishna is speaking about food. We'll pick it up next time right from here. We did not obviously get all the way to verse 10. I will be happy to stick around for another couple of minutes if any of you have any questions. So please go ahead and pop those questions, any questions or comments you may have, into the chat. And if you are watching this after the fact, you can write to me, or if you have a question that comes up later, you can write to me, Hari@Hari-kirtana.com. I'll be very, very happy to hear from you. I know that there is one question that all of you, especially those of you who are yoga teachers, have, which is, how can I learn more about Sanskrit? Because you've been hearing me speak now about the particular words being used in these verses and taking them apart and looking at these compound words and getting a deeper sense of what they mean by analyzing the Sanskrit. So you may be thinking, how can I learn more about Sanskrit? Well, here's how. And now, a word from our sponsor. I have a free masterclass called Sanskrit Made Simple for Yoga Teachers. It's on my website, and I will once again pop the URL into the chat for those of you who are here now. I'll put it in the email that I send out tomorrow, but you can simply go to my homepage and it'll be one of the pull down menu choices. And this is a free masterclass that is an introduction to my online course, which is not as free. But it's only 45 minutes long and will get you a very, very nice start on learning Sanskrit, and I'm pulling it directly from my course, so you'll get an idea of what's in my course. So if you or anyone you know is interested in such a thing, now you know where to find it. Okay, Carla, thank you very much. And that's all, folks. Our work is done here for this evening. Thank you for staying a few extra minutes. Like I said, we're going to pick up where we left off rather than just proceeding from verse 11. We'll see how far we get next time. I'm making no promises, but we will start to talk about sacrifices and austerities as we move into the next portion of chapter 17. And you're very welcome. Good night. I look forward to hearing from all of you if you have any questions after the fact. And I'm very, very grateful to all of you who were with me here this evening in real time, and equally grateful to all of you who are joining me in unreal time. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Right. You're very welcome. Have a great night.